So I would like to welcome everyone here into the virtual third space tonight. Welcome to this beautiful space where we get to spend some time together. And this is part of our new normal. And it's a lovely way to get to spend time together when ordinarily we wouldn't get to do that. And over the last year or so here in the third space, we've really learned, I think, to appreciate and enjoy one another's company, meeting in this way and in this space. The space between me and you here on my screen and me on your screen and you, this is a really beautiful and sacred meeting space. When we used to meet in the Docklands precinct of Melbourne face to face, which we still do, but when we did that, I would always acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation used to use the Docklands, well, what we call the Dockland precinct, for two things. The Docklands was a swampy area where a lot of food was grown and captured. So it was a really rich source of food, but it was also a meeting place where the traditional custodians would meet together to enjoy one another's company. And so with respect to the traditional custodians, that's exactly what we're doing. We're meeting together, enjoying one another's company. And tonight, Jana Holland will be bringing us a rich source of soul food or food for our soul. So I'm really, really, really thrilled that we can have Jana joining us here tonight. Jana has become a good friend, particularly over this last 12 months during the COVID period. And I have the utmost respect for her and her faith practice and her character and her laughter, which is just really beautiful and life-giving. And thrilled to be able to welcome her here tonight. Jana is a highly experienced musician. She is a spiritual director, and she is also a transformational leadership coach. So if spiritual direction is something that you're interested in, or your organization's looking for leadership coaching, then here's your lady. So I want to welcome you all here into the virtual third space, and now I'm going to hand over for our centering prayer workshop over to you, Jana.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and I'm excited to share this practice with you. Just to give you a little background about myself, I come from the US, from Michigan is where I was born. My ancestors come from the Netherlands, as well as the Irish, Scottish, Celtic traditions. My ancestral knowledge comes from the Abrahamic Judeo-Christian tradition, and that is where I'm most well-versed and draw my language from. And I just want you to know, though, that although my tools and wisdom are rooted in this faith tradition, I have no agenda for you to think or feel the same way I do. I see your faith journey as your faith journey, and I honor that. And my hope is to provide a space where you can explore and connect, listen, and experience your own intimacy with the source of love. This workshop I'm going to do today is called Centering Prayer, Contemplative. I'm just going to give you a little bit of history and sort of begin to frame what centering prayer is for you before I lead you into the practice. So centering prayer is a simple form of non-conceptual meditation. And it's rooted in Christian mysticism and Eastern Orthodoxy, and was resurrected in the late 1960s, early 70s by 3 Trappist monks at St. Joseph Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts. They were Father William Menninger, Basil Pennington, and Thomas Keating. And these 3 fellows set to take the essence of the contemplative Christian tradition, drawing from the traditional monastic practice of lectio and the writings of Christian mystics such as Teresa of Avila, John of the Cross, and Thomas Merton, and put it into a modern meditation format that would be accessible to all lay people. Most importantly, centering prayer is based on the wisdom sayings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. In Matthew 6:6, this translation is called The Message. Jesus said, "Here is what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense God's grace." Okay, so I'm going to stop there for just a moment and unpack a few of the words. If you don't come from the same tradition background I do, some of these words might not make sense to you. So first of all, the Sermon on the Mount. It's found in the book of Matthew in the New Testament of the Holy Bible. It's in chapters 5-7, and it's widely known as one of Jesus's primary teachings. In these teachings, he's speaking from both a Jewish context and he's also speaking to a Greco-Roman audience. And so he's calling, from a Jewish context, calling the people to reconsider who God is and what he desires from his creatures. And so he's calling them to see God as the Father, who sees and cares about the heart, not just external righteous deeds and religion. And from the Greco-Roman context, he's inviting people into a way of being in the world that promises a truly good life or human flourishing. So that's what the Sermon on the Mount is. Just in a nutshell, it's a beautiful passage. If you're interested, go ahead and read that. Monasticism. Monastics were mystics who wanted to go deeper into what Jesus was teaching. They were sort of born out of empire religion or a response to empire religion. So after, Jesus walked and gathered people into the fullness of this message that he gave in the Sermon on the Mount, and through just his life modeling. And so people began to embrace that life of flourishing. But then there was an empire named Constantine who sort of took hold of the teachings and created what we understand as an empire religion. So it became the religion of the land and the law of the land. And it began to distort Jesus' teachings. And so what happened was these people who really wanted to embrace this teaching began to go off into caves and dwellings. And we call these folks our desert mothers and fathers. And they began to practice ways of moving deeper into what Jesus was teaching. And contemplative orders were formed. They eventually enmeshed back into the world religion of Catholicism, and but the practices themselves continue to hold that same essence of rebellion that those early monastics were promoting. Contemplation, that word in the Judeo-Christian tradition, is this idea of taking a long, loving look at God. When you can look at something or someone long enough that you can love it. It's Saint Gregory the Great at the end of the 6th century said, contemplation is the knowledge of God that is impregnated with love. To have a contemplative orientation, according to spiritual director Tilden Edwards, refers to a direct, immediate, intentional relationship with the divine mystery at the heart of reality. In her book, Alice Freiling writes that a contemplative attitude is to listen with continued attention, not distracted, not preoccupied, not interrupting, just listening thoughtfully and thoroughly with consideration, not judging, not correcting, not busy preparing an answer. That's the idea of a contemplative attitude. Richard Rohr addresses what a non-contemplative mind would look like, and he suggests it's dualism. Dualism is, it's either this or that. Everything's very black and white. You choose your side and you have to fight to keep your position. He calls it low-level truth between two debaters. Okay, so back to centering prayer and that passage that Jesus spoke on the Sermon on the Mount. I just want to read it one more time with that in context. Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense His grace. That's the essence of centering prayer. So one of those monks, Thomas Keating, he said, centering prayer seeks to open our awareness of God who is within us. Or you could say to open our awareness to the source of love, which is within us. Centering prayer differs from mindfulness, from meditation, mindfulness meditation, which is about the consciousness, right? It emphasizes a single point of awareness in the mind. But that's not what centering prayer is up to. Centering prayer starts by recognizing you're going to get caught by thoughts, and it works to help you release them once you get caught. So thinking back to that word from Jesus, to focus, to just sit there as simply and honestly as you can manage. We're going to have thoughts entering in. So we're not trying to manage them. And we're not trying to create a single focus to manage them, is what I guess I'm trying to say. So a thought is anything that brings your attention to a focal point, right? Could be a piece of conceptual work, a hum from the lights above you, an itch on your nose. If you start thinking about it, that's a thought. What centering prayer teaches you to do is to simply let them go. It's a meditation practice whose whole method is repeated, gentle release. It's actually so low key that many people don't know anything's happening. We're not, in centering prayer, we're not trying to create a desired middle state or preferred state of clarity. It's simple. When you notice yourself thinking, you let it go. So what's the point of all this releasing and letting go? Centering prayer creates a pathway of return. There's a famous story of Thomas Keating teaching this practice to a group of nuns. And this particular nun came up afterward and was super frustrated because she said she just had like 10,000 thoughts through the whole thing. She just couldn't sort of settle her mind or get herself focused. And she was really frustrated with herself. And his response was beautiful. He said, well, that was just 10,000 opportunities to return to God. Centering prayer can be measured, not only in a change of attitude, but a change in physiology. Studies show that those who practice centering prayer feel a sense of freedom, a drop into a deeper place in self. Neurologically, pathways get activated between the head and the heart. We have brain cells in our mind, in our heart, and in our stomach. They're all connected. And so it creates this pathway of heart coherence. It differs from prayer as we usually think of it, in that it's a it's a receptive method. Well, prayer is usually about talking to God, asking of God, giving thanks and praise. Centering prayer is about heartfulness, heart coherence. Just to clarify, heartfulness is the cultivation of interior silence in relationship to the ultimate love reality. For the Christian, it is developing the ability to return to God. Thus, centering prayer is a practice that makes space in one's heart to center on and hear from the divine love reality. In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, you would say, or they would say, you must put the mind in the heart. You must put the mind in the heart. And only then will you be able to see rightly. Only then will you be able to access what in the classic Christian tradition is contemplation. It's not about resting in God or emptiness. It's about entering a sphere of enormous presence, of a knowing impregnated by love, of such a high order of intensity that it drowns and overwhelms the usual middle faculties. It's not about absence, it's about presence. And with the mind and the heart, one can learn to bear the intensity of the light of love and thrive in it, to orientate in it, to right oneself in it. Okay, so since we don't have a focus for our attention, intention is everything. Our intention in this time of our meditation or prayer is to sit in the presence of this intimate other, without thoughts, without reactions, without response, without commentary, without even having to hold on to a sense of I am here. Just be. The intention is to open, to be available, to be, as Thomas Keating says, when silence meets presence, there we have contemplation. So it is to sit in this presence in whatever form it takes. So how do we practically do this? It's simple. If you catch yourself thinking, you let the thought go. You don't have to create a force field around yourself to keep thoughts out or be self-critical if thoughts come in. That's natural, it's normal. They're gonna come in, it's okay. Just notice them and then gently let them go. I actually find that the longer I practice this, I actually relish in the act of releasing them, of letting them go. Finally, in centering prayer, we often use a sacred word. So this is not a mantra that we speak in our mind over and over, but rather serves as a way to remind us of our intention. It reminds us that we've been caught by a thought. So you could use a certified religious word like God or Jesus or Spirit, or a phrase like be here, trust, love, open, anything that you choose that will remind you that we are here to sit in the presence. Okay, so are you ready to give this a try? Yeah, okay. So as we go into this practice, I will begin by walking us through some breath work, maybe a body scan, and then we're going to sit in silence for about 10 minutes. During that time, you'll have an opportunity to put into practice the concepts I've shared regarding centering prayer. So the idea of centering, noticing your thoughts, bringing that word to focus, and then releasing. Just returning to the presence. And then once we finish our time of centering prayer and silence, I will guide us out of that time. So to begin with, it's important to just a few more practical things, actually. Just a few things. We're going to, if it's possible, you want to find a comfortable position, but it's important to keep your spine straight and to sit with your heart center open. If you may notice as we're going through this, slight pains or itches or twitches in very, different parts of your body, that's really normal. And it's usually due to the untying of emotional knots in your body. You may notice a heaviness or lightness in your extremities. And that's usually due to a deep level of spiritual attentiveness. So in all these cases, though, we're not going to pay any attention to them. We're just going to acknowledge the thought, and then we're going to return ever so gently to our sacred word, release. Okay. So, yeah, sitting in this upright position, I like to place my hand on my belly and one on my heart, but whatever you're comfortable with. Gently close your eyes. We'll just begin to find our breath. You can deepen that breath and feel that breath being pulled from your belly up through your heart center into the head space, and then back down through the heart center and into the belly. Just creating that sense of coherence, imagining that breath flowing all the way up and all the way back down. Breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. You may like to take a couple cleansing breaths. So as you breathe in through the nose, you'll blow out through the mouth. Sometimes people like to push it, creating a sound. Just do a body scan. As your breath is flowing, become aware of your body. Bring your attention to your feet, up your legs to the back of your calf. Moving up the thigh to the back part of your legs. Just noticing how the chair is supporting you. And you might just like to sink into that a little bit. Let the chair hold you up. Shifting your attention to your back, the lower spine. Feeling that chair holding you up. Not changing anything at all, just noticing. Moving our attention to our shoulders and to the crown of our head. You might just become aware of your eyes and your nose and your mouth. And bring your attention to your chest, where the center of your heart is. And before we go into our silence, I'm just going to remind you to choose your word, something special to you that's connected to God or your sense of the sacred. Just take a moment to choose it. So we'll begin our centering prayer sitting here for about 10 minutes. Just remember, you might notice your mind will wander. This is normal. Anytime you notice your mind is thinking of something else, just release it. Focus on your word and come back to the quiet. And we'll slowly emerge, becoming aware of your body, in your chair, your breath. You may like to drop your chin to your chest, rolling your head around ear to shoulder, and the other way. You may like to wiggle your toes, stretch out your fingers. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I'll finish by reading a poem by Isaac Pennington, written in the 1600s. He writes, "Give over thine own willing, give over thine own running, give over thine own desiring to know or to be anything, and sink down to the seed which God sows in the heart, and let that grow in thee, and be in thee, and breathe in thee, and act in thee. And thou shalt find by sweet experience that the Lord knows that, and loves and owns that, and will lead it to the inheritance of life, which is its portion." And so we finish by acknowledging the presence and the collective ability to sit in that presence. Bless you.
Well, thank you, Jana, for that lovely practice and some of the rationale and history behind the practice of centering prayer. I'm thinking that it would be really valuable for us to maybe take some questions. So if you have some questions, you could pop them in the chat if you like, and then I can read them out. There are two questions that I wanted to ask Jana to begin with, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first one is that could you just recap or remind us of what the purpose of centering prayer is?
Yeah. The purpose of centering prayer is to practice sitting in the presence of the divine. If you can imagine, I don't know if anyone's ever done the exercise where you sit and look at someone for an extended period of time. It's a mindfulness practice as well, and you basically look into each other's eyes, gazing. And there's something that happens in the brain when you do that, where you begin to experience the interconnection. And it's a similar idea, I guess. Yeah, it's just returning to that presence is what the modality does. I was thinking earlier today also about, I don't know if you've ever walked on a tightrope or done a slack line, but when you're doing that activity, you're not actually meant to look down at the rope. You're meant to actually look way ahead at where you're trying to get to, because if you look down, you'll actually lose your balance. And so it's sort of this gaze that we are trying to sit in. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. While just before I ask the second question, just to remind folk, if you do have something that you'd like to ask Jana, then we'll do that. But my second question, Jana, is how do I find a word or a phrase that will help me in my practice of centering prayer?
Well, I suppose it's not actually really about the word. The word is sort of just you like lifting your chin up and looking ahead on that slack line. So I suppose you could just sit quietly and just decide what word helps you to release. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's actually not about the word. We're not trying to create a mantra or remind ourselves of something. It's just that lifting or that releasing trigger.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the walking meditations that Michael has taught us, he also suggests that we, in a physical sense, we look ahead, and sort of head towards that. So I suppose what you're saying is that by looking up, we may not be looking at a word exactly, but it might be a conceptual notion of the divine that we're looking up at and being drawn towards and into communion with.
Yeah, it could be a symbol, it could be a phrase. Thomas Keating would say that the sacred word is not the object of attention, but it's the expression of an intention of the will.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just going to read out these couple of questions here. So one of our participants has said, "Thank you, Jana. I love the passage you read at the end. Who is the author and is the writing available anywhere?"
Who is the author of the poem I read at the end?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep. That's Isaac Pennington.
Uh-huh.
And that was written in 1661. Long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find it online, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So we have another comment/question, and that is, not sure what was supposed to expect. My word with grace wasn't feeling presence in any kind of charismatic way because I wasn't listening for anything, but I also didn't have many thoughts, just there, which I'm assuming this person means just being present. Is that the objective?
That is the objective. There's a beautiful psalm that reads, "Be still and know that I am God." So the objective isn't experiential in the charismatic sense. You are correct there. What this practice is doing is building up the muscle to practice to be in the presence of God. It does create pathways, so it does change your psychology. So it does eventually manifest in experience by how you begin to engage the world around you. Because as you engage in centering prayer without expectation and without judgment and without a need to sort of control the conversation or need to experience something, then you begin to engage the world around you that way as well. And that actually brings harmony to your experience with others. So that harmony you're experiencing in the centering prayer exercise is what's happening. It's just like when you go to the gym and you're building up your muscles, you don't always notice until like a couple weeks later. And then you're like, oh, wow, I actually am starting to get a bicep. So that's sort of what centering prayer does. It's a practice that builds up the presence muscle.
Wonderful.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, wonderful. Kind of like the building up the awareness, or the muscle that is aware of that presence and of the divine. It's really interesting, Jana, that you use those words just now, the words of be still and know that I am God, because for me, yesterday actually, I was talking to a mate of mine, and he used these exact words in speaking to me, and in his prayer for me. And it was interesting. I was reflecting later in the afternoon about these words, and was thinking about the word be, which is in this context is a Hebrew word, but the word be can also be, like, obviously used in the Greek, in the New Testament books of the Bible. And I was thinking about how this word can be translated as be being. So a sense of not just a static be, like statically be still, but more of an almost an alive, kind of active be being still. And so yesterday afternoon, for the afternoon, I was thinking and kind of contemplating this notion of be being still. And it was such a helpful thing to think about, that this word can be translated in this dynamic, kind of alive, kind of active kind of way, yet rather than a kind of static one-off, like, stop at the stoplights kind of thing, be still, and so that was a really helpful, I don't know, just a helpful thought, I think. And so I wonder if this is the same notion of be being still and know.
Yeah, it's active presence.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. We have another question, and I'll just let folks know we've only got time for a couple of more questions. So if you've got something you'd like to ask Jana, then please drop it in the chat box. So another participant has asked, how long should one do this on a daily or weekly basis?
Well, there's different schools of thought, but the basic sort of the basic suggestion is twice a day for 20 minutes. And, that's like asking an athletic trainer, how many times do I have to do these reps in order to get this kind of muscle? So that's sort of the prescribed amount that the folks that are, leading and practicing and writing about this, the contemplative life suggest. But I find that when I'm going about my daily life, I find little 5-minute sections here and there. So yeah, it's really up to whatever your fortitude is, right? And capacity. It's really a non-judgmental practice. So it's just, even if you just even did it for a little bit, I'm sure that it would be helpful.
Yes, that's good. Good answer. Not so prescribed.
Yeah.
More organic. So we have another question, and someone has popped the link to the Pennington poem in the chat. So someone else has asked, could this be used like mindfulness as a way to recenter in a stressful situation, or does this not have that purpose?
Yeah, I think that it can be used to de-stress, because when you're moving into a contemplative lifestyle, which this practice is beginning to, it's part of that, right? So if you think, I always think of things in the physical realm because it helps me make sense of things in the emotional and spiritual realm. So if you think about it like, say you're diagnosed with an illness, and you you find that if you were to change your diet and exercise more, that you would um, eventually find healing, right? So, in the idea with a contemplative lifestyle is, some of the thoughts that I shared at the beginning regarding shifting from a not a dualistic mindset, right, to learn how to listen with continued attention, to not be distracted or preoccupied or interrupting, to not listen with judgment or needing to correct or be busy preparing another answer. All of those ways of engaging life, whether it's with the divine or with each other, um, is dualism. It's self-protective. It's this low-level truth. It's this, yeah. So centering prayer is a part of the contemplative uh, Christian pathway, and it can shift our our outward expression in life, just like changing your diet and exercising more can bring healing to your body. So in that sense, it has that ability to help with stress and recenter. And yes, definitely.
Mm, good. It's good. And I'm sure it's like anything. I think last week we had Naomi, one of our facilitators, read a quote. I don't remember where she got it from, but basically the quote was saying that, the practices that we put into place in the not stressful times in our lives, or the normal days and periods of time in our lives, really are the ones that we can turn to in those stressful moments, because they're part of our neural pathways, they're part of our practice, they're part of our everyday being. And so, doing them regularly and as a matter of discipline, I guess, as well as pleasure of enjoying the divine presence, then they're ready and available to us in those difficult moments.
I will say it's probably not the greatest idea to do this before bed, because it actually begins to activate your mind, even though we're doing it later this evening. So if you go for a walk now, and begin to actually engage in dialogue, if are into that kind of prayer, conversational prayer, relational prayer, um, it really will activate. Or if you write in a journal, it's a good time to start writing. Yeah.
Yeah, which is great, because that's one of the questions in the chat. Can you journal while doing this, or more in being still?
After. Yeah, journal after.
Journal after, yeah.
Yeah.
Good one. All right. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Want to say thank you once again, everyone, for joining us here in the Third Space. It's really always a very great honor and privilege and pleasure to see you here and to connect. And yeah, it'd be lovely to just share a soul hug right now. So that's a practice that we have in the Third Space, where we cross our arms like this, and we give each other and ourselves a soul hug. So go ahead and do that now if that's what you'd like to do. So soul hugs, everyone. Lovely to have you here. Really a great privilege and a great pleasure. And I want to give a big thank you to Jana for your time, for your kindness in sharing this practice with us tonight. And I know that you would be more than willing to, touch base with both if that's something that they would like to do or learn further. So yeah. All right. Well, I'm just going to close it off here. You're welcome when I finish the recording to hang around and have a chat. I'm just going to do that. So peace, friends. Shalom.